Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar today, and welcome to those who are joining online. Clarissa, thanks for joining us today, and we'll give a couple of minutes there for any others to join there as well. But we've certainly got a bit of an action-packed webinar today. We've got some great speakers, so we're hoping that you get some real value out of it today. We'll just give it a minute or so just to get a couple more people coming in. Alison, how are you? Good afternoon, thanks for joining. From Anadara, there you go, very good. Nice to see you there. Very good. Thanks, Alison. All right. Let's get a couple more there coming in. So yes, we'll be going through quite a few interesting topics today, but we'll just give it another minute or so, and then we'll wait for these people to come in. All right, let's go. So thank you, everybody. Great to join today. Really like to welcome you on this webinar in the pursuit of a perfect digital payroll. So I'm James Hole. I'm your host today, and it really has never been a better time to really focus on what does a perfect digital payroll look like. And it really is down to the current situation we're facing, and we really are being forced to maybe actually accelerate that process. We're live, and we're going to be certainly attempting to respond to any of those questions that you bring up as you are engaging with us. We certainly want to make an engaging session as well, and please put those comments in there in the comments panel. Hi Eve, how are you going? And hi Gemma, welcome. All right, so I'd like to, it's a very exciting webinar. We really want to bring together a number of very strong thought leaders in the space to try and address the topic. And I'd like to address or to welcome our very esteemed panel who will be joining us today. And really between the panel themselves, we've got over 80 years experience in the payroll space. So we've actually got from the KPMG side, we have Kevin and Nina, two very knowledgeable representatives from KPMG, and we also have Anthea from Media. Anthea, would like to say a few words first, please.
Hi, thanks James. Hi everyone on the call. My name's Anthea. I am the reward and payroll lead at Media. I did the maths coming into preparing for this session today and realised that I've actually been working in payroll for close to 17 years and have a particular passion for payroll transformation projects and aligning the payroll function with informing reward strategy. It's the humour isn't lost on me that my surname is Wager. You could say having a career in payroll is fate. So I'm very excited to be here and share some of our learnings.
Great, thank you very much, Anthea. I'd also like to welcome Nina from KPMG, who's actually a lead consultant in the transformation, people and change practice. Nina, I'd like to say a few words.
Hi everyone. So as James said, my name is Nina Speecher. I'm a director in our workplace relations advisory practice in KPMG, and for the last 2 years been spending a lot of time working with payroll, particularly with the huge increased focus on compliance in Australia.
Certainly. And then we also have Kevin from KPMG. Is actually a senior manager in the KPMG payroll consulting practice. So welcome, Kevin. A few words.
Thanks, James. As you mentioned, I'm a senior manager in KPMG's employment services and payroll consulting practice. I sit in Melbourne, hence why I'm in my home at the moment, stuck in lockdown. Over the last 2 years, like Nina mentioned, I've spent a lot of time managing payroll issues and employer compliance issues as well.
Excellent. All right, thanks very much. And we've got the joiners there. A lot of other people are joining there, so welcome everybody that you join in there. I hope you get something from the session. So thanks everybody. We might move on to one of the initial topics of today. Again, welcome there, Mohammed. Okay, so let's get started. So really, what does make up a truly perfect digital payroll system? I guess this is really a topic there. There's a lot of people sort of ponder about, and I guess it does have a lot of relevance to the current times there. Looks like a big question, and really is there. And I thought I might get Kevin. Kevin, do you want to share some of your insights? What do you think makes up a perfect digital payroll?
Yes, thanks, James. When I think about that question, what makes up a perfect digital payroll, what comes to mind to me is a payroll system that's seamlessly integrated into an organisation and produces very little noise. So to the extent that we're hearing noise from employees, from the payroll team, or from the regulator itself, we know that we haven't optimized the payroll function as yet. When I think about a perfect digital payroll system of the future, or what features I'm looking for in a perfect system, I think the features that come to mind to me are firstly around integration, or strong integration into core systems, to ensure that we're not manually maintaining information in multiple places. Secondly, it's around intelligent automation. So to minimize the number of manual processes that sit within the payroll function. An example of that might be smart rostering, to roster the right people at the right time and produce the right business outcomes. Thirdly, I think I would like to see continuous compliance flags built into the payroll system. So it's really hard to stay abreast of all of the changes within the payroll landscape. So to the extent that the payroll system was able to push flags to me, I think that would, suggesting updates that I need to make, I think that would help me a lot in maintaining that perfect digital payroll, along with an analytics engine, I guess, built into it that helps me self-diagnose any issues that might exist. And then an important point as well is around, I guess, the user experience, both for employees and for the payroll team themselves. So the user experience, or the user interface for employees, is particularly important, so that the payroll team isn't fielding questions from the employees directly, and the employees are able to self-service their payroll questions from the interface directly. And then a good user interface, or an intuitive user interface, I think is going to lead to much better outcomes from the payroll team itself, because they're able to make the changes that they need to make and manage a payroll very effectively. And then finally, due to, I guess, the sensitivity of the data that sits within the payroll system, I think that there's going to be a high importance on security. So we're hearing a lot about cyber crime at the moment. So we need to make sure that the perfect digital payroll needs to be highly secure to avoid any issues. To your initial point, does it exist? I'm not sure if it exists at the moment. But what I do know is vendors like Ramco are spending a lot of time and effort in taking feedback from organisations for the features and enhancements that you want to receive. So I think we're on a rapid journey where these features and enhancements are going to be coming to us readily over the next few years. So it's really important that we get our IT infrastructure within our organisation ready to take those updates, because I've done plenty of payroll reviews where an organisation might be 2, 3, 4 versions backwards in terms of their current payroll software, because it's very difficult to push those updates in their current IT infrastructure. So getting your IT infrastructure ready for when Ramco and the like push these additional features that you need is going to be really important in achieving that perfect digital payroll from my perspective.
Absolutely. You make a lot of good points there, Kevin. So appreciate that. And I think we might sort of touch on those a little bit more down the track as well. So really, if you say it doesn't exist there, but I think some of the other aspects there is really around the controls and the governance structure, and sort of help to sort of manage some of those risks there. So you identify some of those with the sort of system side of things, but again, there's other mechanisms, controls and governance there. And I might call upon Nina there to share some insights on that side of it, please.
Yes, thanks, James. So I think to support an ideal system, you need to have the governance, the processes, and the people capability that support that. So from our experience, we do a lot, and I work very closely with Kevin, working with organisations very much in Australia around the compliance perspective. But what it's uncovered is that to date, in a lot of organisations, payroll is in a silo to HR, to legal, to systems, and other key stakeholders. And so having clear visibility and accountability across the end-to-end payroll process is going to be critical to the success of any payroll system. Supporting that, coupled with clearly documented policies that everyone understands what their entitlements are and when triggers are happening as well. So what we find is when people come into issues around non-compliance is where they don't have a clear understanding of what their obligations are. So having a system that supports that with processes and the people capability as well is going to be really critical.
Yeah,
In
thanks.
addition to that is just around validating and monitoring of the data rules you have as well. So that ongoing monitoring, and if we have a system that kind of pulls through for that, that would be the perfect digital payroll system in my perspective.
Yeah, we're all looking for perfection. So really, I guess to sort of summarize there, what I'm sort of gathered from your inputs there is really about obviously compliance automation, where you can remove some of the burden and ensure the burden that the vendor has a robust platform, and also places there to maintain the compliance. I think that's one of your points you brought up there, Kevin. But it's also about maybe digital story and technology, harnessing that. And I think the whole point of there about the employee experience and expectations there is also vital there as well. So, Anthea, what are some of your thoughts on this?
Look, hearing the description of a perfect payroll system from Kevin and Nina and some of the things that you've highlighted, James, it reminds me of the magic payroll button that us payroll people like to joke about, that we press once a month and then everything magically happens. So the idea of, as a payroll leader, having a system where we can have that upfront compliance validation, checking the inputs, escalating where inputs are perhaps missing or where there's anomalies, having a digital assistant to help with the employee experience side, and then rounding that out by being able to act on those and create actionable insights and consult back to and advise back to the business. That to me sounds like living the dream, and I look forward to the day when that's possible.
Yeah, I think we've covered a huge range of everything from integration all the way from a magic button. So that certainly is pretty exciting there. So thanks for that. So we might sort of move on to the next question there. So this is really around being able to accelerate. So really it's about taking into account some of the current situation around the actual sort of COVID situation we're all going through at the moment. And I think it has really looked to actually accelerate some of the need for changes, and maybe for looking to adopt some more technology and doing some more of a digital transformation there. So I guess, Anthony, what's your take on this sort of being able to need to accelerate the transformation?
Yeah. Look, payroll's always been subject to change. That in itself is not new, but definitely seeing the pace of change is increasing, not just due to internal factors, the appetite for change in a lot of businesses, but as well as also the external factors. COVID, the IR landscape, which is bringing in additional considerations to payroll teams. And sort of creating this scenario where where they're trying to accommodate those increased demands without having the optimized systems in place to fully accommodate that. From a project management perspective, having a payroll transformation project in play has, depending on the complexity of the payroll, has the potential to be quite a lengthy process. And when there's a lot of competing sort of projects or focus areas within the business, being able to gain that traction and see the benefits of process optimization and deploying some of the tools early on means that not only can BAU payroll teams sort of gain that benefit, but there's also that continued buy-in and support from the executive team. Yeah,
absolutely, very important. So I think thank you, Anthony. I think we've got a question there from the audience. We put it on the screen there. Is there a question? No. Okay. So, Kevin, could you like to perhaps elaborate on some of those points there that you've might be thinking about in relation to acceleration?
Yeah, from my perspective, I guess it comes back to the information that the regulator has at the moment. So if we think about single touch payroll, it's providing the ATO with more information than they've ever had before and on a real-time basis. So what we're seeing, or what we've seen the tax office do at this point, is we've seen them hire a team of data scientists into the tax office. And what we're expecting is they're using the single touch payroll information to profile organisations and profile them and benchmark them against their competitors or their peers, sorry, just so they can get an idea of the compliance landscape across Australia. and then do a much more targeted compliance in the future than the reactive compliance that might have happened in the past where an employee had raised an issue.
Yep. Okay.
I think you think about JobKeeper, that could be one of the examples where the tax office might look to roll out a compliance regime over the next year once the JobKeeper regime has been stopped.
Yeah, and I guess a point that I'd like to make too there is the recent JobKeeper, where we had the existing framework of the SCP in place. We're able to accelerate that utilising existing infrastructure to very, very quickly roll out and be able to really, pay all these people there and sort of support the whole process there, which is vital, and that's really a good example of that. Nina, could you please maybe elaborate on this topic?
Yeah, so speaking of regulators, if you look at the Fair Work Ombudsman and the recent focus around wage theft or underpayment of wages, that's another reason why we're seeing organisations really have to fast track payroll transformation. It's really brought payroll and compliance to the forefront, and we're seeing organisations having to really critically look at their governance systems and processes and capabilities to make sure that they can be compliant. There's criminal sanctions now, there's hefty fines, so it's really, really important, and it really has driven, from our perspective, the need to accelerate payroll transformation. Okay,
thanks, Ray. We actually have a question now from Clarissa. So Clarissa has actually answered that the actual external factors influencing payroll transformation is IR landscape. What is the IR landscape? So perhaps Nina, would you be comfortable expanding on that?
Yeah, well, Anthony, if you want to go. So the industrial relations landscape, as we know, has been changing. So we in Australia have a very complicated web of modern awards and enterprise agreements, which makes it incredibly hard for anyone to really navigate it, let alone a payroll function in isolation. So having to unpick that, and on top of that, the increased focus and requirements on tracking time and being compliant and paying correctly has just put that increased focus. On top of that, in Australia, as many of you would know, we've got a number of different IR working groups at the federal level that are looking into these issues and why is it so complex and how do we start unpacking that.
All right, thank you. Can I get you to talk up a little bit in the future session? Thank you very much there. So we might go on to the next topic there, and really sort of try and cover off another area that is, again, sort of delving into trying to expand the whole landscape around this and trying to expose some of the, in this case, maybe some of the challenges about managing payroll today. So I think I'm very keen on understanding a bit more detail about this. The really sort of challenges, some of the challenges before, and during, and after the managing payroll as such. And I think that perhaps Anthea, bringing your very unique experience, to share some very specific challenges that you may have faced or have been evolving over the last decade. What are some of your thoughts here?
I definitely feel that the acceleration in technology and the development that's happened, not just in a work environment, but even in employees' home lives, is driving a raised expectation on what they can expect in a work environment, and having access to information on demand or being able to self-serve changes. However, there seems to be still a little bit of a lag in some of the workplace systems, perhaps due to cumbersome legacy systems that are not as flexible to facilitate that change. In addition, I think payroll as an industry is on the cusp of quite a significant shift from being very transactional to being more of a strategic partner, and so that expectation of the outputs from payroll teams without necessarily corresponding with the same elevation of attention to team resourcing, or perhaps an over-reliance or overconfidence in set and forget mentality around payroll systems, and not having the rigor around having a good process of review of that is all compounding.
Great, thanks very much, Anthea. So we actually just wanted to bring to attention, we've got nearly 400 people who've joined us across the various platforms today. So welcome everybody, and hope you're getting some out of this. So Nina, we might just quickly go to you on this particular topic here around some of the challenges, and I'm sure this is really part of your sort of core. You know, you don't get caught into afternoon tea and scones. You kind of get caught into sort of platform issues. So, what's some of your thoughts around this?
Yeah, so touching on kind of the question we had before, it's the complex workplace relations or industrial relations landscape makes it incredibly hard, and it's a bit of an art and a science on how you navigate that and understanding the changing obligations you have and what triggers different entitlements. The other challenge we're seeing is that payroll, in our experience, are not always involved when, say, for example, if you have an enterprise agreement when they're being negotiated, so you don't understand the intent, and there's no real correlation between what's agreed in an enterprise agreement versus how you translate that into a payroll system, and that's where we're seeing some disconnect as well. Manual process interventions is another big thing, and we talked about automation, and that's going to reduce risk and exposure as well.
Yeah. So you sort of seeing there's any sort of common thread coming out of all this? We've obviously talking quite a few threads there, how we can pull this all together. We actually have another question that I think we've been posing there. So from Rod, thanks Rod. So this is an interesting topic. So is the wage theft happening because employers don't have the correct tools, or due to complexity and regulations? So I'm thinking perhaps Kevin, you might have some impact or some input into this one, if you think.
Yeah, I guess from a tool standpoint, or from the reviews that I've been involved in, I don't think anyone's doing the wage theft deliberately. I think it's coming out because of the complexity, as Nina talked to earlier, around the IR landscape in Australia, and then that complexity not being configured correctly within the time and attendance and within the payroll system. So once that configuration is incorrect and that configuration isn't constantly revisited, I guess there might be underlying wage theft issues that continue year on year, and that go uncorrected, I guess. Nina, do you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, so I think there's, I don't think anyone in our experience is going out to wage theft. They're not going out to underpay their employees. It really has come, it's a multiple reasons. There's no one root cause in our experience. And it has come through what Anthony was saying is underinvestment in historically in the payroll function. They haven't been seen as that strategic function. It's the complexity of the industrial relations environment and understanding what your obligations are and how you do that. It's lack of understanding amongst operational managers on what triggers different entitlements, such as overtime. And there's also just around the lack of processes and ultimate accountability as well that we're seeing. So there's a number of reasons. There's no one reason. I think that's why it's so complex.
I think that's absolutely spot on, and certainly to my way of thinking, it's an increasing level of complexity, reducing time frames, under investment, and it's kind of a sort of combination of those things that are coming up that are then obviously creating a bit of a problem. Also, the systems that haven't necessarily been updated and etc. So it's a multitude of issues that are driving that. Just going back on the challenges one, Kevin, did you have any sort of final points on the topic here around some of the challenges about managing payroll today?
Yeah, from my perspective, the only additional points to add is we've had a heavy focus on superannuation compliance within my team particularly, and obviously we have the superannuation guarantee amnesty that's currently available to employers. I think through the amnesty work, what we've seen is it's very difficult to make sure that you are 100% compliant. A small issue might exist, but it might have existed for a while. So I think such as like a leave loading issue, I think that's what we've seen. And then the other piece around it, I guess that's not necessarily talked about openly, is I guess the piece around choosing if you want to outsource your payroll or not. So picking the right outsource vendor and dealing with that whole outsourcing process, I think that can be a challenge for an organisation today.
All right, fantastic. Thanks very much. We've got another question here. Come up on the screen there from Siva. Thank you, Siva. So what are some of the key items an organisation should take into consideration before embarking on the journey of a payroll transformation? And then what parameters determine the cost and timeline of the payroll transformation? So I think, Anthea, this is one right there for you.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the preparation that goes into embarking on a journey of payroll transformation, there's probably a couple of different areas that I like to focus on. For me, having a really great processes in place is, before you overlay that with technology, is going to be really key, as well as having the correct people involved in the project, and having the conversations and really questioning and interrogating the business to understand what it is that the business is looking for, and also how sort of changes in the external environment, or the appetite that the business might have for change, will influence that transformation journey. The parameters that determine the cost and the timeline, in Australia, as Nina mentioned, the complexity of the award system is definitely going to it's going to lengthen that process because of the additional configuration that's required. So each payroll function is going to have a varying degree of complexity that needs to be considered. Costs a funny question. Sometimes the upfront cost isn't always going to be the total cost of a system. So understanding what some of those trailing costs are, whether you can carry the headcount if you're looking at approaching manual processes versus technology enabled processes.
Sure. Thanks very much. Anthea, I hope that answers your question there. We've got another question, I believe, as well. Put up on the screen. So this is for Needy. Thank you, Needy. So how can you ensure compliance when there's no clear logic provided in a regulation? This is a tricky one. Or even when the tax officers have different views on the handling. So that's always an interesting one. Nina or Kevin, you can kind of decide on which one maybe the best.
I might jump in first. I guess it's about documenting what your positions are. So to the extent that a position isn't clear, it's about building up a work paper internally on how you've arrived at your particular position. And once you've got to that standpoint, to the extent that you're still not feeling comfortable about the position that you arrived at, that's where you can engage with the tax office, or you can engage with a service provider like KPMG to get that extra level of comfort that the positions that you've taken are robust and accurate. I know the tax office are quite open to having that open dialogue with you to get to the right outcome, and having that dialogue up front is going to save a lot of time and effort downstream should any issues arise downstream.
Thanks, Kevin. I think that's good advice. Absolutely. There. We might move on to the next one of the areas that we might explore a bit more in depth there, and it's really around the sort of compliance area. So really, with compliance being a sort of a key lever of success, really it's about how to identify gaps and improve governance, but it's about how do we manage all the challenges and disruptions at the moment, which is obviously another huge factor, and really how we actually adapt to that. Nina, do you have any sort of real life or stories around this one you can share?
Yeah, so I just thought I might share with everyone sort of the approach we would take at KPMG if we were coming in to help you with this process. So we kind of approach it in kind of two buckets. One is around your obligations and what you're obliged to put into your payroll system in order to assess compliance. And the second piece, as we've been talking about, is around governance processes and people capability. So we would really sit down and work through the whole end-to-end process. So let's map your process and identify where the gaps are or where potential exposures lie. As I mentioned before, we find that often there's a disconnect between the different stakeholders in the process, and often bringing them together will flag some of those gaps that need to be addressed. We'll then look at accountabilities and mapping those and identifying who the key right stakeholders are, and then come up with a remediation plan. So what are the things you need to fix? And that could include implementing a new system or upgrading your current system. It could include maybe communicating better to your managers and supervisors on the ground on how they should be coding in, or what they should be putting in and what things will trigger. Really, it's a whole of organisation approach. It's no longer just payroll function by themselves. And I think that's really been a key lesson that's been learned in the last 12 to 18 months.
All right. Thanks, Nina. We've got another question here from Vanessa. Thanks, Vanessa. So are you finding payroll system providers are becoming more hands-off as they don't want to be held responsible for system caused underpayments and make getting support for your system difficult there? So I might take the one on there myself. So I honestly don't believe that we are sort of more systems. We actually, if anything, we are more engaged on a day-by-day basis. I'll give you an example. So we're constantly looking for new ways of making sure we are compliant, for example. So we actually have a tool that we actually use internally here across all the countries that we have payroll for, about 45 or so. And we actually have a real-time dashboard that helps us ensure and measure what our compliance is. So that's one aspect to make sure we are constantly being maintained for compliance and being active there. But as far as getting support, absolutely, I think any vendor there, especially in the payroll space, has to be hands-on, get down deep, has to be obviously provide the tools and the whereby to actually help you manage yours. Now, the configurations and some of the data, we can't be, obviously have any full control over that one there, but essentially I do think that typically my own experience is that vendors are very much heavily engaged in the day-to-day operations to make sure that we are, fully there with you on this journey. Okay, so any other points there? We might move on to the next point there. So, okay, so the next slide there is really around about trying to really take this a little bit further. And I guess KPMG have actually got quite a unique approach on this. And I think this is, they certainly have shown it, and they've built, a very deep and very, large practice around this to really start to help organizations to really manage some of these areas that have just, been discussed now. So Nina, perhaps you can actually elaborate on what you have to offer in that area.
KPMG has identified this big issue.
So we can't hear you too well, Nina. If you can come a little bit closer.
Sorry. The KPMG has identified this issue, and what we've pulled together a multidisciplinary team which involves people from employment tax and payroll compliance like Kevin, people with industrial relations and change management experience like myself, and a number of other people from our risk assurance and other capabilities to really understand, put together a proposition to help clients understand and step through the process. It's a 4-pillared approach. The first pillar is called health check. And that is really a light touch to understand, could you have an issue? Could you have an issue? It's a self-assessment survey that you undertake, and it will go through some of those key triggers that we talked through before around your types of your workforce, classifications, if you've got juniors, casuals, things like that. And we'll give you an indicator of what your potential vulnerability. Say you are vulnerable and you want to go to the next stage. The next stage is what we call investigate. And investigate, there's 2 components. The first piece is doing a deep dive vulnerability assessment. That's looking at your industrial instruments. It's looking at your processes. It's looking at your governance to understand where you might have those gaps. And then if you do, then we'll work with you to develop a set of wage rules to then recalculate to see how big that issue might be if you have an issue. The third phase, if you find that you do have an underpayment and an obligation to repay your employees, is to help you through that remediation process. So that is setting up and working with you with a function around how do you go back and communicate to the regulator, communicate if there's media responses that you need to have, or communicate to your employees as well. We'll also then help you through rectifying the root causes of those issues. So whether it be systems, coding, interpretation, operationalizing things. So we'll think about we'll look at the root causes and help you fix that as well. And the final phase is around maintain and transform. So how do you maintain compliance moving forward? And how do you actually transform your payroll function as well, to what Anthea was talking about earlier? So it's a end-to-end proposition. You can dip in at any stage, depending on where you're at internally. And it's flexible as well. So we can come in at any point and have a chat to you about what your issues might be and help you understand if you've got a potential exposure or vulnerability to.
All right, thank you, Nina. I think you certainly covered a large depth and breadth there, and sort of covers there. I think there's a lot of areas there, a lot of organisations need to, sort of start thinking about. And I guess this brings us into another area there that is also one of those areas that gives you a lot of more depth and knowledge and insights into how your payroll system is performing, how you're actually performing there, and any issues you might be aware of or need to be aware of there. And it's really around the role of data and analytics in the payroll system there. And perhaps, Anthea, you can actually give us some examples and, pardon the pun, but also insights into what the role of data analytics might actually play in some of the driving decisions now and also into the future. What are some of your thoughts around that and how you're tackling this?
Yeah. So for me, the HR and payroll data aspects are two faces of the same coin. And so my personal preference is to have that data sit in a single solution where you can really leverage the power of bringing those two data sets together. I don't feel that there's any point in analysing data just for data's sake. So the power of being able to tell a story around that that payroll and HR data comes from really understanding what the business drivers are, understanding what the strategic objectives of the organisation is, and also what leaders within the organisation are looking for, to be able to understand what sort of data points you need to do a bit of a deep dive into, and create a story that you can then share back with leaders to help inform the decisions that they're making on a day-to-day basis. At the start of so any analytics journey, the analysis on the data is going to be quite reactive and retrospective, but as that maturity develops, being able to overlay payroll data with other business functions provides a really great opportunity to use that data to inform real-time decisions. A great example of where I've seen this work phenomenally well is where workforce planning data and sales data work in sync to inform rostering decisions ahead of actually incurring that employment cost.
Okay, thank you for that. I think it's certainly a very important topic. Nina and Kevin, do you have any views on data analytics and what some of the conversations you might have had with your customers around this, and what would your inputs be here?
I can take a lead and then Kevin can jump in. I think there's two sides to this that we see. There's definitely an angle for payroll analytics in terms of assessing your compliance, but also when you're thinking about what you can use payroll analytics for going forward, we see a really strong alignment in terms of workforce shaping and looking at roster optimization as well. So these are key things to understand where your costs are, where you can get some efficiencies that will lead into bigger strategic decisions like Anthony was touching on as well.
Yep. Thanks, Nina. Kevin, any inputs there?
Yeah, not too much more. Drawing on from what Nina just said, I once heard a story that effectively said that if you actually analysed your payroll data and looked at the sick leave balances and how someone's actually running down the sick leave balances, you'd actually be able to predict when someone might resign. So there's actually a lot of information through your payroll that you don't appreciate. So running that analytics over your payroll information will provide a lot of insight that you might not be expecting.
Sure, thanks, Kevin. So I guess I'm also seeing another angle there, and really is around what I'm sort of seeing out there as well, that a lot of times I go and talk to customers, they have multitude of systems. They've got multiple payroll systems, multiple databases, multiple instances. And I guess if you've got multiple systems, it's pretty hard to actually get a single view and some really good insights and sort of insightful data as well, to be able to draw some good conclusions and some good decision making there. So I guess it really is around being able to maybe pull these systems into one more single system, have a single data set that looks over it there, and that give you far better, more and accurate reporting over there. And I guess, you know, we're seeing a number of ways, but one way that Ramp has done it there is actually provide what we call a global dashboard. It's a single page that actually shows you all the information of all your payrolls running, no matter where they are, etc. And it gives you that ability to really pull it into one single view there as such. Do we have another question there, please, on the screen? Here we go from Brett. Thanks, Brett. So Brett asked there, do you feel that the impact of COVID is going to damage the historical data sets, which will form some of the optimizations? That's a good question there. Any and Anthea, any inputs there?
I think there's ways of mitigating that potential, which might be as simple as, you know, if we're talking about from a rostering perspective, creating a particular shift to identify when employees are not working due to COVID, or creating new pay codes to again identify that that information, and working really closely with the vendor throughout that process to understand what other ways the technology can either choose to pull that data into the optimizations or exclude it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the short answer is probably from my viewpoint, yes, there will be obviously some anomalies in this because it's quite a strange time and strange data, and a lot of things are going through there. It's just going to make a quick difference there. But Kevin, do you have any views on that?
I think it came back to what Anthony was saying at the end there. So to the extent you feel like the data is going to, over this COVID period, is going to throw off your models, you need to work with the person that's providing that analytics to potentially discount that information. Like, to the extent that you have access to a lot of historical information, carving out the last 6 months might not throw off the model too much. So it's something that you really need to consider. Does this data need to go into the model that I'm using in my optimizations?
Okay, fantastic. Thanks you for that. Okay, so we have another question here from Mohit. Thanks, Mohit. So hi, Nina, Anthony, and Kevin. So how do you see AI and ML will actually impact the payroll systems? Are you seeing any of this demand or any of this need for your customers and your own experiences now? What are some of they? We'll start with you, Anthea, perhaps.
I think it's actually a really powerful way that technology can support payroll function. If we can leverage technology, AI, and machine learning to eliminate some of those low value transactional activities that a lot of payroll teams are having to deal with themselves at the moment, that frees up their capacity to deal with looking into analytics, being able to be that business partner within the organisation and work in concert with HR and finance.
Yep. Thanks very much. Nina, do you have any inputs on this question on AI and ML? What you see as part of the future statement, I guess?
Nothing. I think Anthony kind of covered off my view. I don't think I've got anything more to add.
Kevin, thanks.
Yeah, I guess it's using the emerging technologies as best as you can. So if we look at like the AI component, it's like the natural language questions that someone might ask to a chatbot, and enabling people to self-service what they need out of the payroll system. In terms of the machine learning aspect to it, I guess that's probably going to feed into the analytics and into those optimizations around the rostering, for instance, knowing historic trends, applying those historic trends to a current scenario.
Yeah, and I might add another perspective. That, again, what I'm sort of seeing out there, that we're using AI and ML at Ramcode, not necessarily replace, but it's ready to augment and to actually support users. So typical use cases might be used to use large data sets can then be sort of distilled down to providing those little needle in the haystack type things. So some anomalies or outlying information there, or something that actually exposes a bit of information based on a pattern, based on an algorithm that you might not have been aware of. And that's where I'm sort of seeing some benefit. But the others are more everyday things where we actually surface in some of our screens now. We have the ability to streamline the way the screen works and to surface only the data that's relevant, contextual. And what it does mean is goes through all the data and says, okay, based on your past pattern, based on your past data entry experiences, these are the most likely types of information you're going to need in your screen. So we actually default it in there for you. So it's about user experience to really optimize and to streamline wherever possible. And it's also about trying to find that sort of anomaly, outlying issue or outstanding data that you haven't actually seen anywhere else. If you just run a straight report, that might not come out. But you look at a larger data set and a larger pattern there, you're going to get some trends analysis coming out there that might help you see something that wasn't there before. We have another question there, I believe, from Rakesh. I'll put it on the screen. Okay, so Rakesh asked there, can you also please advise how digital payroll addresses data security, GDPR, or respective country data protection, and how uptime SLA has been guaranteed? So it's a little bit of a tricky one there. I think that I'll answer that one, but essentially, I mean, GDPR is something, even though it's not necessarily quite active right now, right here, but we have to be aware of it. A lot of our customers have operations in those countries where GDPR is obviously very, very important. And I think that any provider these days in the software world has to make sure that they are complying with GDPR, and it's absolutely a mandatory requirement for us. And that it really goes to the whole core of what data security is, and all the different mechanisms, role security, auditing, all the controls and mechanisms, the SOC 1, SOC 2 type reports that you need to actually make sure that you are demonstrating that you are actually compliant in this space as well. And then around the sort of uptime, SLA being guaranteed. I mean, that is typically any cloud provider, anybody provides this sort of service, there has to have a very, very high SLA and has to have very, very certain clauses and mechanisms to actually make sure we maintain that. So, is there anything else there from the team there that you might add to what I've said there? No? All right, thanks for that. All right, we might move on to the next topic. I might look at this one here, which is really about, how can payroll leaders align people processes with technology, and also then start to look at how we can future-proof your payroll. And it's really trying to look at the information and the whole process from a slightly different perspective there. And I thought, Anthea, perhaps you can take me through some of your perspectives and some of your aspects around this, please.
This is an area that I get extraordinarily excited about. For me, the foundation for future-proofing a payroll function always starts with the people, and hiring for a culture of curiosity and continuous improvement sets the groundwork for that to become embedded as practice. So having the right mindset, the right behaviours established in the team that will ultimately own any system once it's gone live, and they're the individual practitioners who are going to be required to understand how they interrogate the outputs from the technology that's in place, or how they work with the vendor to deploy updates, as well as having that curiosity around what changes are happening both locally, internally, externally, globally, that may end up having an impact on our own payroll function. Working closely with the vendors and having a very tight relationship with your vendors is really important. Having that open two-way communication. It kind of touches on the question that Vanessa asked earlier around the comfort that you have that the vendor is going to be able to help guide through sort of updates that are required off the back of legislative change or in internal change, understanding what is on the development roadmap and any product updates, and how that is going to influence the way that you operate in your payroll environment. And then thirdly, having a really robust cadence around process review. We try and make them a little bit fun. We call them process parties, and there's lots of snacks and laughs along the way. But it's actually a really important part of our payroll environment, is making sure that we're keeping on top of that. Our processes are relevant. They're responding to the changes that are happening internally and externally, and also identifying where gaps have developed or maybe behaviours have changed either within the payroll team or due to inputs that are coming from other areas of the business. We've found leveraging both internal and annual audit processes as a really great tool to facilitate that process review, as well as identifying other times where a process review may be relevant or applicable.
Yeah, thanks. I love that concept of a process party. Sounds like a real hit there. I think we should all have one of those very regularly. We've got another question here, so thanks very much. So how is COVID going to impact the payroll transformation journey for various organisations? That's a good question there. So I guess it's probably a number of different aspects in this one there, but I think I'll start off there with a very brief statement there. But I think that it's going to accelerate, and I think what I'm seeing there is that people have to adopt something that's going to be future-proof is exactly spot on target. And it's about being able to make sure you're building resilience. You've got a robust platform. You've got a robust platform that's both able to perform, but also able to be compliant, and make sure you can actually have there's a very close connection there with the vendor to make sure that that is all going to be fully managed for you and sort of going into the future. So I think that's absolutely my viewpoint there. But I'm happy to take some more from the team. Kevin, any thoughts on this one?
Not too much more, I guess, for me to add on that, to be honest. I think we've talked through the issues in the data. I think you've talked to the fact that COVID's accelerating the process. Like if we look at the broader finance function as well, like an accounts payable function, which required invoices, and now needed to uplift and be paperless. I think COVID is accelerating a lot of digital transformation. That would be my only view on this point.
It certainly is driving a very strong point there. That without digital, I don't think organisation would actually survive there. But Anthea, what's your viewpoint on this? This is your sweet spot.
I definitely agree that it's accelerating almost to the point where, if you think about the way that COVID has changed the way that we work, payroll teams historically, there was that expectation that you would operate from an office environment, whereas now the norm is that you're not. So how is technology or payroll teams need to question whether their technology is enabling that in a way that still maintains security around the data that we handle, but also that the technology is able to scale in a way to respond to change that, to be honest, nobody could have foreseen, 7 months ago. And yet we're all operating in a very, very different way to how we did at the end of 2019.
Yeah, we're all sitting at home doing webinars and working as if it's all perfectly normal and do it every day of the week, etc. As such. Okay, so we've got probably a sort of final sort of section there you might sort of cover off there. Actually, before we go on to that section there, Nina and Kevin, any sort of final thoughts on there about future-proofing?
For me, I think I talked around future-proofing at the start. I think we're on a rapid development cycle at the moment. So I think as an organisation, you need to ensure that your infrastructure enables you to deploy the changes that are going to come. So spending time to get the infrastructure right at the moment, whilst the features are released over time, I think that's going to be really important from my perspective.
Yeah, very good points there. Nina?
Yeah, so I think having an agile and flexible approach, particularly in the COVID environment, is going to be critical. I think payroll transformation has accelerated, but it needs to be supported by the right capability, the right processes, and the right governance. And that's going to be critical to success, particularly in these uncertain times.
Thanks for that. I think we've got another question here from Clarissa. We'll put on the screen, please. Thanks, Clarissa. So what is the first step we can take as an employee to initiate payroll transformation within our company? And maybe, Anthea, this might be something that you can respond to.
I think the first step is identifying where the gaps and risk areas might exist in your current environment, and understanding what the potential risk or worst case scenario is going to be. What's going to need the most urgent attention, and also how you establish buy-in and sponsorship at an executive level around the urgency that's required.
Yeah. And certainly from my experience, I see a lot of employees are very frustrated if they can't engage, and perhaps is a generational thing, but I'm certainly seeing the younger generations sort of, say, fill in a bit of paper. You mean what? They really want to engage. They want to be digital. They want to be able to do things in real time. They want to be able to have that experience there. And I think a lot of times I'm sort of seeing that employers are frustrated with the organisations that they don't feel they're getting that sort of experience there as such. So really what I'm seeing there's a number of different types of sort of threads pulling together here. And I guess it's we've sort of covered quite a large ground here around, compliance and compliance automation, really trying to remove the burden of a day-to-day and having tools and systems and processes in place is going to help you to manage that better. And it really does support that whole sort of digital story around, being able to have better user experiences, whether or not we have employees have access to digital assistants, getting information when and where they need it, etc. But also having much better data insights and actually analytics over your data and over your system as well, to give you this really strong view there, and remaining agile, and certainly being able to adapt to the new things there, and not only now, but obviously building in a sort of future proof in there as well. So we certainly have a lot of our customers here at Banco running what we call our support bots, which again is something that we actually have, we can roll out there. The employees can simply ask straightforward questions. How do I do this? How do I set up a bank account? How do I change my super? But it's those sort of things that are the user experiences of tomorrow that are available today, where people want to actually start engaging the systems, about getting information and not have to rely on the overworked payroll and HR staff. And that's what I'm sort of seeing there as well, that it's still very about harnessing some of those technologies to really sort of start driving some of those changes. And I think that's where they are, certainly is, what I'm seeing is certainly from the younger generation anyway. So any sort of last minute, any thoughts on our content we come today? I might go to each one of you now and give us a quick summary, a final wrap up there. Anthea, start with you.
Look, I think despite the challenges in the current environment, I think the current climate is a really exciting time for payroll teams to harness that interest that's happening at an executive level around the compliance sort of risks, and also marrying that with the technological development that's happening to enable sort of leveraging that to springboard into a new world for payroll. I am really hopeful that this ends up seeing payroll as a exciting and rewarding career choice for the next generation.
Yeah, thank you. And I certainly agree with you. I do see we're on a cusp of change there as well. And I think there's a lot of drivers there, and a lot of problems we've had there. We want to improve those, and I think there's an overall upswell or sort of welling up of people wanting to drive that sort of change. Nina, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I echo Anthea's sentiments. It's a really exciting time to be in payroll at the moment. The focus on compliance and wage theft and COVID have all meant that there's actually more investment and more focus on payroll transformation. How do we move payroll from being transactional to a strategic function? I think it's really exciting, and I think it's just the precipice of something great. So it's going to be very exciting to see in the next couple of years.
Absolutely, thank you very much. And Kevin?
I guess the only other comment from me that people haven't already said is, like, to the extent that there are features that you need as part of your payroll system, or there's a nice to have feature that will enable you to optimize your payroll, I think it's about providing that feedback to your advisors and to your payroll provider, so that those features can be put onto the roadmap and they can be delivered to you, so that you can have that perfect digital payroll of the future.
No, thank you very much. I think that's been absolutely great input from all of you today, and I'd really like to thank all of you for your insights today and your wisdom, and I think I also like to thank everybody online who's attended today and also contributing to those questions, and thank you for being very engaging, a lot of questions there and interactive there. And I think that sort of in closing, sort of comments there, we are in quite unique circumstances and certain challenges there, unprecedented times, and I think that it's how we manage this going forward is really going to be key to the future success. So I'll leave you on that point there, and I thank you all again for attending today. Thank you very much. I'll call an end to it.